That's just a terrible take, personally.
We got shellacked.
Buddy, my name is Trevor Shaughnessy, and welcome to a very special episode of the Starting Lineup. For this episode, we're going to go through all Big 12 schools and rank them in basketball. I'm joined by two great hosts, Alex, as well as Jacob. Boys, are you ready to get to this ranking?
I'm really excited. This is one of our specialty shows of the upcoming semester, and watching this last year, I couldn't wait to be on this myself. I can't wait to get into it. I know we all talked about these rankings, and I'm excited to share them. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, like Jacob said, I love basketball, so I was really excited for this, and I'm just ready to rank teams, so let's get going.
Well, right before we get into the rankings, there's one more question I want to ask you guys, especially with University of Florida winning last year and the SEC taking it. Going through these rankings, do you think Big 12 is going to be a player when it comes to national championships?
I'm glad you brought this up right and early. I wholeheartedly believe that the Big 12 is the best basketball conference in all of college sports. Now, SEC, they may take the case with football, but when it comes to basketball, I definitely think it's going to be a Big 12 school this year that wins the championship.
I agree, honestly. You summed it up perfectly, but the top of the Big 12 is very heavy with teams 1 through 5, I think, having a chance to compete for a national championship.
Well, we're not going to start off with the heavy hitters. We're going to kick things off with our lovable little brother, Arizona State University, coming in at number 16. Alex, what can you tell me about them?
Arizona State, last year they didn't do too well, and I think it's going to be the same result this year. They lost a big star in Jaden Quintance, who was the number 2 center in last year's recruiting class. He transferred to Kentucky after a rough year. And I also think this is just going to be a last year kind of thing for Bobby Hurley if he doesn't step it up with the Sun Devils. I think the impact player for the Sun Devils would be Marcus Adams Jr. He was ranked top 50 nationally a couple years ago, and he's coming from Cal State Northridge, where he averaged 16.1 points per game.
What do you think are the odds of us seeing another Bobby Hurley outburst during this season?
Very high. He's like his brother Dan Hurley. It's hard for him to control his temper, but Dan Hurley has a winning record to back that up. So,
yeah, and if I had to add anything, I do see an outburst coming from him this season. I mean, looking last year, he was 13-20 in his season and an abysmal 4-16 in conference play. You just can't have that. And with him going into his 10th season, this could possibly be the last season we see of him.
The hot seat is warming up. But we're going to move on to number 15. That's going to be West Virginia. Jacob, what can you tell me about the Mountaineers?
Yeah, the Mountaineers, they're coached by Ross Hodge, and he just signed it's his first season, and he just signed a 5-year deal. So it is looking like he's going to be the captain, the leader of this team moving forward. He has a lot to prove. Last season, they were 19-13, so pretty respectable. They were above 500, and they were 10-10 in conference play, so 50-50. If they can get anything above that 50-50 mark, that would be a win for this team. We do have them ranked at 15, so not so high on our list. Players that I'm looking at Trayson Eaglestaff. He's a 6'6 guard. He put up 18.9 points last season, and he's a senior this year, and he is a transfer from North Dakota. We have Huff, who is a 5'10 guard. He's on the shorter side, but he does facilitate this team very well. He can get very streaky. He puts up a decent amount of assists, so good floor general. And with this new coach, he comes from North Texas, and he had a great outing when he was over there. And so they brought him in, the Mountaineers, thinking that he can do well what he did there and hopefully turn that into wins this season.
Do you think the reason why we've decided to rank them this low is because we just haven't seen what this new coach is capable of?
I think that also, yes, has to do a lot with that, but also, too, that, there are some things that this team has struggled with, like things that I may note. They have limited chemistry coming into this season. They have entirely, basically, a new team full of transfers and freshmen who have to go through like these early growing pains of being new to the college scene. We also see that they have, a turnover issue from last season. So down the stretch in these games and in big conference play, that can be a huge detrimental factor when it comes to why we had them ranked so low.
Well, moving on from the Mountaineers, we're going to be going down to Florida to look at the University of Central Florida. Alex, what can you tell us about the Knights?
The Knights really haven't been too good at basketball since Taco Fall last played there, and I think this year is no exception. You know, last year they finished 20-17 overall, barely escaping with a winning record, but I just don't see really any improvements. You know, a lot of people transferred out, but they did get some good transfers in, like the star duo from Milwaukee. Themis Folks averaged 14.6 points per game for the University of Milwaukee, and I think he'll bring a lot of floor spacing, as he also averaged almost 6 assists per game at Milwaukee. So I think his floor spacing will help a lot.
But it is worth noting that Milwaukee isn't in the Big 12. Do you think he's going to be able to put up just as impressive of numbers in this new conference?
I think we've seen year after year, you know, transfers coming from smaller conferences, people saying, oh, I don't think they're going to perform at this bigger conference. Like, say, for example, Walter Clayton last year with the Florida Gators took him all the way to the national championship. I think he can do what he did in Milwaukee here at the University of Central Florida. I also think a big strength they have is their front court with John Bull returning, who's 7'2". Bull, obviously, you hear that last name, you think of players like Manute Bull and Bull. Height just runs in that family. So I think he can have a breakout year and score a lot in the post and help with their post defense.
We'll see how University of Central Florida does. Coming back a little closer to home, Jacob, we're looking at University of Colorado. What can you tell us about the Buffaloes?
Yeah, the Buffaloes, you know, they're coached by Tad Boyle. He's been there coming up on his 16th season, so he's a huge staple to this team. They struggled last season. They had a 14-21 record overall. They were 3-17 in conference play. That is not great. So why did they bring him back? He just seems to be a huge focal point of this team. They've shown that they trust this guy, and they're looking to improve from, I mean, really, it's not that hard to improve from such a poor outing last season, but they want to improve, especially with all the firepower that we have in this Big 12 conference. Now, some key players that we got, we have Elijah Malone. He's a 6'10 senior forward who's averaging 8 points a game, but also 3 rebounds per game. Height is very important in this loaded conference, and especially when you have a player that can put up an offensive output as well as a great defense, that's going to be a huge part of that team. Also, we have Sebastian Ranick, who is a 6'9 forward who also averaged 6 points. So they have a decent team. They are looking to, because they have a lot of front court players that are returning from the last season. So although they didn't have a great season last season, they do have a lot of the returners. They do have that chemistry from that season, and hopefully with the new players that they have, the new talent, they can have a team that is cohesive, and with their backcourt boost, they have a lot of people to carry offensive loads. It's not just about the defense, which is really great about this team. They need to improve on their offense. Now, I want to watch Barrington Hargress. He is an explosive scorer, and he is a transfer from UC Riverside. And he could really define Colorado's offense moving forward. That is something that they struggled with last season, putting up points on the board.
Alex, I want to ask you something about which Jacob brought up, and that's team chemistry. Do you think team chemistry, obviously it plays a very large role in basketball, but for a team like Colorado that struggled so much last season, is chemistry going to be enough to change things?
Obviously, you know, chemistry can't always override skill, but I do think with the right chemistry and the right group of players, you guys can work together to get your skill up. I think with the right chemistry, you bring your teammates' skill up as well as yours, and you start performing better.
Well, why don't you tell me about the team and possible chemistry for our number 12 pick, which is going to be the University of Utah.
The University of Utah just picked up Alex Jensen in his first season of coaching. He was a former Jazz coach, assistant coach, and former Mavericks coach, and he also played at the University of Utah throughout the 90s. I think the biggest difference maker for the University of Utah will be Terrence Brown. He's a 6'3 guard who played at Fairleigh Dickinson last year and finished 10th in the country for scoring after falling short to Central Connecticut in the semifinal for the NEC tournament.
I want to ask you something about that coach coming in. Do you think that he may initially struggle shifting from NBA to college play?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it's a completely different game, and the paces are different. It's obviously two halves instead of four quarters. It's a whole different game, but I do think with the mind he has as a former Utah player, he understands what it means to be a Ute, and I think he knows how to run the game well enough for them to succeed.
I think he's one of the first people to know what being a Ute actually is.
Exactly.
Moving on, Jacob, tell me about Oklahoma State. What are the Cowboys cooking up?
The Cowboys, definitely. They are coached by Steve Lutz. He's heading into his second season with the Cowboys. They had a 17-18 overall record, and they were 7-13 in conference plays. Isaiah Coleman, he's a 6'5 junior guard. He was putting up nearly 16 points per game, and he's a transfer from Seton Hall, which is another great college basketball team that has made it far in past conferences. We also have Anthony Roy. He's a senior guard, and get this, 25.7 points per game. That is astounding. He's a Green Bay. He played at Green Bay, and he played 11 games before injury. So the fact that he had that scoring outburst in such a short amount of time, I'm looking forward to what he can do with a longer season and hopefully being healthy. Now, they do have offensive struggles. From last season, a big part of that was the transfer portal. Now, we've seen this with many teams. The transfer portal has either been a huge help factor, but it's also been a huge crutch to these teams. Many times when teams aren't doing well, teams want to enter that transfer portal and go where the sun is sunnier. Also, they have a lot of depth with their perimeter shooters. That is going to be crucial in this game that is moving away from the basket and where you're wanting to put up where 3 points are better than 2 points.
Yeah, and then you mentioned the transfer portal, and I want to go back to your previous point about team chemistry. How much can the transfer portal affect team chemistry if even only one or two players leave?
Right, so we have a bunch of players that are coming essentially in a new start with this new team. It's been a long off season since last season to now where hopefully Coach Steve Lutz got the team together, were able to bring them together, work on their strengths, but also address those weaknesses. The transfer portal is going to be interesting moving forward with this world of NIL, of big money in college sports. I'm curious to see what it looks like in the Big 12 conference. Definitely one that is a big basketball conference.
I agree with that. Well, moving on, we're going to be looking at Cincinnati. Alex, what can you tell me about those Bearcats?
Cincinnati took in a huge transfer from UCF, taking in Mustafa Thiam, and he's a 7'2" sophomore. Something with those 7'2" guys at UCF, man. They love him there. He averaged 10 points per game and 6.4 rebounds with his time with the Golden Knights. I think this guy will be a huge transfer for them as they struggled a lot with their interior defense last year and losing a lot of guys in the portal.
Right on. Coming in at number 9 is going to be the Wildcats. No, not the ones you're thinking about. It's Kansas State. Jacob, what can you tell us about Kansas State?
Their coach, Jerome Tang, he's heading into his third season with this team, and he was a coach actually at Baylor before this for 19 seasons. Wow, that is huge. And to have a coach at such a great college that like Baylor, to then have him now at Kansas State, that's going to be a huge improvement for this team. Last season, they finished 16-17 and 9-11 in conference play. They got great players, like we have PJ Haggerty from Memphis. He was the number 2 transfer in this season's class. He was the AAC Player of the Year recipient. Nate Johnson putting up 14 points per game. He is a senior guard, expecting a lot from him. He was a transfer from Akron, another big college basketball school. And we have Marcus Johnson, 6'7", senior forward, 16 points per game, 5 rebounds. That is a very consistent stat line that I'd like to see utilized, and hopefully I can't complain with that outing. You know, having 5 rebounds per game with 16 points, that's huge.
I mean, Kansas State seems very consistent, but do you see also room for growth?
Right, so they are a pretty consistent team. Something that gets to be a weakness on their end is their three-point shooting. They ranked near at the bottom of the Big 12 last season. They got pretty streaky with their shooting from 3, but it was not consistent. Also, they have a mix of veterans and newcomers, and building that chemistry that we talked about earlier, I'm curious to see how that works out. We have players that are older in their college years. Maybe they have a little more a chip on their shoulder, a little more, pride and ego and wanting to get to the league. And we have these new players thinking that they can come in and make a big impact early on. So I'm curious to see with that blend of ages, how well they come together and really work on those strengths as a whole. Also, we got a lot of depth concerns with this team. We have a lot of players who have played backup positions in their previous schools. So to have them now on this team and be more of a focal point of their offense, I'm curious to see how that works out. But yes, Kansas State at this ranking I think is very fair.
About middle of the bunch.
Correct.
Definitely a team to keep an eye on to see if they trend upwards or trend downwards. Well, so far we've looked towards the bottom of the list of teams who have been struggling in the Big 12, as well as a few teams who have started the climb upwards. Right after this commercial, we're going to look at a couple more teams, and we're going to see you then.
I'm Kate Condon, and you're watching UATV3.
This is Madeline Heinrich, and you're watching UATV3.
I'm Jaden Zelm.
I'm Dimitra Alarcon.
I'm Carly Siegel.
I'm Delaney Penn.
I'm Gabby Rosenberg.
I'm Rachel. My name's Simone.
I'm Isabella Will.
I'm Avery Klein. I'm Joey Bernal Alonso.
And I'm Pablo Rojas.
And you're watching
And welcome back. We're going to cover teams 8 through 4. So, Alex, tell me about our number 8 team, which is going to be TCU.
Well, Trevor, the Horned Frogs are being coached by Jamie Dixon in his 10th season, who was a former player actually from 83 to 87. They didn't go too well last year, though. They went 16-16, finishing at exactly 500. And, you know, there's a lot of promising players, promising transfers coming in for them to improve on that. My main guy is Jaden Pierre. He's a 6'2 senior guard who averaged 12.2 points and a big role for Providence last year. I think he'll help out a lot, as Jaden Pierre has been known to get buckets right away for you. And I think that's exactly what TCU needs. In a way, they struggled with scoring last year, and I think that's a big improvement for them.
Now, one aspect of college basketball that isn't talked about as much is the fans and the energy within the arenas. As I know from experience going to McHale, it can play a big role. So do you think having a coach who also was a former player may inspire TCU basketball fans to show up?
I do think so. Similar to what I said to the Utah coach, I think he knows what it means to be a Horned Frog, and he knows the honor it is to wear that jersey and to play for his school like that. So he's going to try to push his players and make sure they need to play how they're supposed to play at TCU, and he will bring in the fans, I think.
Right on. Well, going from number 8 to number 7, we're going to keep it in the state of Texas. Jacob, tell me about Baylor.
I got a lot to tell you about Baylor. They're coached by Scott Drew, who's in his 22nd season. If we remember, it was this Baylor team that actually won against Gonzaga in 2021. So he was there for their first victory in the NCAA tournament. They had a record of 20-15 last season overall, and they were 10-10 in conference play. Now, they have Michael Raj, 6'9" forward. He's putting up 17 points per game, and he's from Oregon State. We have Dan Skillings, who is a 6'6" forward as well, putting up 9 points and nearly 4 rebounds from Cincinnati, so another Big 12 school. Wondering why he decided to pick this school, but he's definitely going to be valued on this team. Their roster lookup is completely retooled with proven scorers and proven players from other big college teams. Their freshman focus, they have gone with a lot of elite wings this player. Now, within a college scene and professionals basketball league, we're seeing a lot of dual threat wing players who can dominate on both offense and defense. So they got a lot of those players this year on their team.
But Jacob, they are still at the number 7 spot. They're good, but they're not exactly at the top. Do you have any idea what may be holding Baylor back from reaching that higher position?
You know, 10-10 in conference play, and especially in the Big 12, that is 50-50. So to be in the middle of this pack, that is actually a good thing for them. And you know, they're a solid team always throughout. They never seem to do too bad. They always do pretty well when it comes to the later season and make it into the NCAA tournament. They got a lot of positives on their team, especially their three-point shooting. They averaged 35.9 38.1% from deep last season, and that's over the course of the entire season. To put up that many shots and to have that level of consistency and putting up buckets is definitely a pro for them. But you did want to talk about why they couldn't move forward, and that has to do with their perimeter defense. Now, when they're on defense and their offense is coming, and the offense is coming at them, they're having a lot of missed opportunities when the offense is just putting up points against them, and that's on-ball defense as well as at the rim.
Gotcha. Moving on to number 6 is a team that I'm a little surprised to see in the number 6 spot, and that's going to be Iowa State. Now, this is a team that had a whole lot of buzz and energy going into last season. Alex, tell me what is going on with the Cyclones going into this next season.
Well, Trevor, the Cyclones are always consistently up there in the rankings, as they are in the AP poll for the top 25 in the preseason poll. But with losses of Keyshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones, that's 31 combined points per game that they are missing out on. But they did bring in Dominic Nelson, who's a 6'5" senior guard who averaged 14.4 points for Utah Valley University and won the 2024 WAC Conference Player of the Year.
What do you predict Iowa State can do this season?
I think Iowa State could be higher than 6 in the conference. I think Iowa State can go from anywhere from 6 and up, but they can also fall down. Like I said, that loss of scoring is going to be huge, but bringing in big transfers such as Dominic and also Blake Buchanan, who averaged 5.4 points for Virginia, who's supposed to be taking a big leap as a 6'11" junior center, I think they can bring that scoring back and be even higher than 6 in the conference.
I think that's also something that makes these early predictions so difficult, is with teams that are bringing in a lot of talent. Talent looks really good on paper, but you can have an early season injury or just not show up. So I think for that reason, Iowa State at number 6 does have potential. Could also see a breakdown. Moving on to number 5, whether you love them or hate them, here they are. It's going to be Kansas. Jacob, what can you tell me about the Jayhawks?
The Jayhawks, they're coached by Bill Self, the man, the myth, the legend. He's in his 23rd season, and in that time he's been there, he's won 2 championships. To have that level of dominance in the modern era and his tenure of coaching is a big deal, big enough for him to sign a lifetime contract to be the coach back in 2021. Their record last year was 21-13 and 11-9 in conference play. Some players that I'm looking forward to this season is Melvin Council Jr., who is a senior guard who put up 14.6 points per game and 4 assists per game, and he comes from St. Bonavue. Also, I'm also curious to see what Darren Peterson, who is a freshman, but he was the number 1/number 2 overall prospect, depending on which ranking system you look at. He was ranked very highly. He was very coveted, and the fact that Kansas was able to scoop him up was a big deal. Kansas has put up a lot of players who have gone pro, so their recruiting process is elite.
Alex, do you agree that that was a big pickup on Kansas's part?
Huge pickup. I think Darren Peterson is easily going to be a top 3 NBA draft pick once this season is all said and done. So I think what he will contribute to the Jayhawks season will be very helpful.
Well, right on. Moving on, I am very excited to talk about the Arizona University, which is not in 16th place. That's right, we're talking about the University of Arizona right here in Tucson, Arizona. Alex, what can you tell us about our Wildcats?
2 words, Trevor. Koa Pete and Braden Burries must watch TV. I think these 2 freshmen and the rest of the freshman class will easily help this team out and make a huge jump this year. I think they can go anywhere from 4 to 1 in my opinion, but it's just such a stacked Big 12 conference where it's really hard to tell who's going to end up where. Braden Burries was the 9th ranked recruit in the country, and Koa Pete was the 11th ranked recruit. They also have other freshmen coming in, such as Ivan, and he played pro in Germany, so that type of experience will definitely be helpful to the Wildcats. Also, returning players like Tobe Awaka and Jaden Bradley will bring that leadership to the team, and I think Tommy Lloyd is one of the best coaches in college basketball, no bias, as he is in 2nd for most wins in 4 seasons, right behind Brad Stevens of Butler.
And I think he's also in 1st for best looking in a turtleneck. Jacob, do you have anything you wanted to add for the Arizona Wildcats?
Tommy Lloyd. He is a proven winner, and he's been a huge boost to this team. He's been a great leader. What I want to also add is that we have Matías Krivas. He is our 7-foot center who we didn't see a lot of last season. He got injured very early on in around December and January, so he was out the entire campaign last year. But we had a lot of great players who filled in that role. But now that he's back, healthy, in his 2 exhibition matches, he's been looking really great, very mobile. He's doing well on rebounds, as well as our great recruiting process. We had 2 top prospects in Koa Pete and Braden Burries. So the fact that we were able to recruit well, keep back some key players, like I'm thinking of Jaden Bradley. That is a elite scorer. He puts up great threes, and he's a locker room person that you want to have on your team.
Now I want to bring up one more thing, especially with Coach Tommy Lloyd, is incredibly consistent at having this Arizona team be ranked nationally, frequently make it to postseason, winning division tournaments. However, we have had the issue where still not quite cracking the semifinals, finals, national championship. I know we all want it, but do you think that eventually, if not this year, eventually he can reach that caliber as a coach?
You know, I'm trying not to have any bias in this, but I do think at some point he will definitely reach it. And this year is one of the better looking years. Back to the recruiting process, they had the 2nd ranked recruiting class in the country, right behind Duke University. And I just think that with that freshman class and the returning seniors and juniors, they can make a serious run this year.
I want to add something too. Thank you. We did talk about this. We wanted to have them maybe possibly higher on our ranking, but there's just so many factors at play with this team. We have a brand new roster, and they are great. However, there's just a lot of factors at play. We got to look at the departure of Caleb Love and Carter Bryant, who have gone on to the NBA, and they were a big focal point of this team and their scoring, as well as the reliance on freshmen this season. You know, we have freshmen who are ranked very high, but we can't put all the pressure on them. Who knows? I may eat my words. We may have a top prospect on our hands, but going into this season, I'm very comfortable having them at 4.
And I agree with that, but honestly, something I would say that's maybe controversial is, as stellar a player as we often saw Caleb Love as, there were times where he would hit cold streaks. There were times when he got mentally rattled. And I think possibly it could be a little bit of a benefit to this team to not over-rely on the star power of Caleb Love and his 3-point potential, and more so work it in and play in a consistent manner.
You're right, we did seem to rely on him a lot of times down the stretch, but I'm constantly reminded of that output that he had against Duke in the NCAA tournament. He was the game's leading scorer. He had more points than Cooper Flagg. It was a game within 10 points. So his departure will be missed, but we need someone to take over that role. I don't know who it is at this moment, but I'm very impressed with Koa Pete and Braden Berry's output so far.
Well, that just does about it, 8 through 4. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to go through our top 3, so stick around. Welcome back. We're going to go over the top 3 teams. Coming in at number 3 is the Red Raiders, Texas Tech. Jacob, can you do me a favor and explain why you think this team is better than our Wildcats?
You know, this top 3, this is where it got really hard for us to make these decisions, but I'll tell you actually. The Red Raiders, they are coached by Grant McCasland. He's in his 3rd season, but last season he had a great outing, 28-9 overall, and 15-5 in conference play. That is huge. In this conference, to have only 5 losses, they were a dominant force last season. They have J.T. Toppin, who is the Big 12 Player of the Year right now in the preseason, and depending on which source you look at, it could be AP or it could be Sports Illustrated, he's ranked very high, if not at the top. Also, we have star power like Toplin, like I said, he is the Big 12 Player of the Year, and he can really do it all on both sides of the court.
Moving on to number 2, we're going to look at BYU. Alex, tell me about BYU. What are they doing? What is special about this team?
This team, I could see making a huge run in the tournament. Last year, they fell short in the Sweet 16 to the number 2 seed, Alabama, but they got some big additions. First off, they kept Richie Saunders, whose great-grandpa actually invented tater tots. So that's bringing in some NIL money for sure. He averaged 16 points last year with the Cougars, and I think he's a big person to keep and bring back. Another addition, though, is transfer Robert Wright III. He actually played on that Montverde team with players such as Derek Queen, Cooper Flagg, Asanuel, and he just had a great season with Baylor, but it looked like it just wasn't the right fit for him, and he came over here. He is a great facilitator, as we saw on that Montverde team. I mean, I know it's high school, but he took them to a national championship and they won it. That's a pretty big deal. So I think him and Richie Saunders is going to make a great duo. But there's also someone else. Obviously, AJ DeBansta. Depending what ranking site you're looking at, the number 1 or the number 2 player in the country, this kid's easily a top 3 pick next year. And I think that he will carry them to a very good spot in the tournament and take them deep into the tournament.
How about you, Jacob? Do you think he'll have that ability?
Absolutely. A lot of people were questioning why he picked BYU out of all schools, but what it really came down to is that BYU has really looked towards this modern era of NIL and looking at their athletes as professional athletes, and they took advantage of that. They're offering them what I can assume is the most money possible out of all the schools he looked at, and he is top talent.
Well, now we're going to move on to the absolute top talent, our number 1 team. Lots of suspense. It is going to be the University of Houston. Jacob, they're good.
Good they are, and it really wasn't hard to put them at number 1. They were in the final match last season in a very close game against Florida. Could be a little controversial at the final moments, but they are coming as our number 1. They got a lot of strengths in this season. Like a lot of their returning core that made it that far are on this team again. They are going to be led by Kevin Sampson. He's in his 11th season, and get this, he is a former Houston Rockets head coach. So he is very much in this Houston lifeline. We look back to Ralph Sampson and their other
Hakeem
Olajuwon. I was blanking on it, but yes, they very tie into tall players that are skilled, and with their ability to be stable with their backcourt, as well as their ability to have physical play, that is huge when it comes down to later in the season when there's going to be a lot more slower paced games, and that is why we have them at number 1. Alex, do you have anything to add to this?
I agree, man. You know, it was a rough loss in the national championship. My friend lost a lot of money, actually. Sorry about that, Will. And, you know, I think they are looking for revenge. As we saw all last year, it was just domination for Houston. And I think this is the year, as they've dominated the AP poll and they've dominated the tournament last couple of years, I think this is the year they finally make it out on top with a bunch of players returning. Like you've mentioned, Emmanuel Sharp and Milos Usman carried the team last year. In their slow pace, the way they play is just amazing for college basketball, and they force teams to play at their pace instead of letting teams be comfortable at their own pace. So I think that's why Houston will take it this year.
And that just about does it for our rankings. But before we go, boys, I just want to ask you a quick question. One of the things I love most about college basketball is just the vibes. You're in an enclosed space. It's packed to the gills. It's very loud. I want to ask you two, what do you think in the Big 12 division are some of the hardest places to do an away game?
I think I'll go first. I got to go with Allen Fieldhouse in Kansas. The Kansas Jayhawks have one of the most rocking stadiums in all of college sports, and they're just so hard to play at. So many players have said how rough it is to play there. And Kansas already being one of the best teams nationally every year, that home arena doesn't make it any easier for opponents.
Jacob, you got any places in mind?
Zona Zoo. The McHale Center is very loud, and when the lights get low, that's when we shine our brightest. Our team seems to always do well when they're at home, and a home crowd, let alone the city, loves its basketball. I do like your pick of having Kansas as a very competitive and hard place for teams to play at, but I like the McHale Center and our chances when we play there.
Kansas versus Arizona. Which stadium is going to have the better fans? There is only one way to decide it, and that's for all of you at home to get those tickets. Go to McHale Center and yell as loud as you can, louder than a Jayhawk.
I know I'll be yelling for sure.
Me too.
From UATV3, I've been Trevor Shaughnessy. With me is Alex, Jacob. This is our preseason rankings. Have a good one and bear down.